So on this week's episode of Be More Super, the podcast, we're showing love for the people behind the camera for Superman and Lois. And Jamison is not only one of the writers, but now a director on the show. Jay, welcome to the show, sir.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Do you know what? It's an absolute pleasure, and I've been trying to get you for quite a while, and luckily you saw your messages the other day as well, just because I think the writing on this show is phenomenal. I think the storytelling of this show is phenomenal. Being a lifelong Superman fan to the point that I've named my kids Lois and Kara, you can't come across a more dedicated fan here at Be More Super. So before we get into your writing or directing, should I say, congratulations on an awesome season 3. We've got two episodes left. The next one on the 20th, and the finale on the 27th. So why do you feel that this season has set the bar for all superhero shows past and future?
Oh man, I don't know. I will let you say that in terms of like setting the bar. I just know that what we, when we came into the room, we just wanted to tell like a really strong family story, and something that this is from day one of season 1. It was the thing that we always came back to as like family, and how can we filter this through the lens of the family experience, things that bringing in things that like we've all been through or gone through, like with our own family or siblings or parents or children, and for this season, that was kind of the same thing. And then in addition to that, we had the opportunity to, really dig into the Mannheims, and that was like a really exciting opportunity. I think I had a lot of pitches into that in terms of dealing with, some of the stuff that Bruno is fighting for, where it's like a villain that you understand, kind of sometimes where he's coming, even if they do terrible things, and you're like, I don't agree with your methods at all. Like that's not, like that's beside the point. Like I think that there's the things that you shouldn't have done and things that are problematic and irredeemable. But at a core base level, I understand your frustrations. I understand who you are, how you got to be the way that you are. And if not for a stroke of luck or like a very specific set of circumstances, other folks could have wound up in that same position. So it's like, I think digging into that family, humanizing them, and then what Chad, Daya, Spence brought to those characters just really made them kind of as like the dark Kents, like this kind of the flip side of like what the Kents are like, but like with having this loving family, but then also a secret identity and a secret kind of thing that's going on under the surface. So all of those factors, I think came together, this season. It was definitely a difficult season to write and be in the room. We're dealing with a very serious subject matter that, brought up a lot of emotions. The research that we did speaking to, survivors and the family around survivors was, it was very humbling, and it was a big undertaking and responsibility to dig into those stories. But I think all we were trying to like do some of those stories justice. Like the and bring in like all of these like strong, interesting, like varied, people who have dealt with cancer in various ways in their lives and pull from that. So, it was a lot. It was a lot this season. But hopefully folks are, are enjoying it and feeling the emotion and the passion that kind of went
Oh.
into making it.
Do you know what? This show gets better with each season, and every season you finish it. And I've got to say that last season, the end scenes with Tyler as Superman was just epic. They really, really were. But it just gets better and better and better. So let's go back right to the beginning and find out, Jay, how did you get involved with the show to begin with? Because you're actually involved from day one.
Yeah. Day one, season one. It was like a small, like I think I was the first staff writer hired, and then Katie and Andrew came in. I think a few days after me. It was like they were hiring folks as the room was getting going. But yeah, so I moved to LA in the first part of 2019 to work on a show called Swagger. It's on Apple Plus. I was the showrunner's assistant to Reggie Bythewood, who is the creator, writer, director, executive producer of Swagger. He directed the pilot and a couple of other episodes, and so I was, and that show filmed in Richmond, which is where I'm from, Richmond, Virginia. And so I spent 2019 kind of going back and forth between Richmond and LA. And it was a really, it was an interesting year. I was like kind of couch hopping and subletting and staying in Airbnbs when I was in LA. When I was back home in Richmond, I was able to stay with family, with my mom. But like it was like my nomad. It was like a nomadic year for me. But while that was happening, I had written a spec script called The American Way, which was a reimagining of the Superman mythos through the lens of the civil rights movement. So period piece, black Clark Kent growing up during the civil rights movement. And that got started getting some buzz. It started making its way around, various folks in the industry, and it actually got me an interview on Krypton for awesome season show. 3 of Krypton. Oh. Great show.
I just can't believe they cancelled it again. I just can't believe it.
So they had an interview I had an interview for that, and it went. I think it went really well. In fact, I think they basically were like, we were going to hire you. They didn't. They told me this after the fact. We were going to hire you, but we didn't get season 3. But what came out of that is the showrunners that I met with sent that script to Todd when Superman and Lois was getting going, and so I had an interview with Todd. I actually was in Richmond working on Swagger, so I was it was one of the windows. So we did a phone interview, and he kind of, and I didn't have the pilot at that point. He just kind of pitched what the show would be. And we just kind of talked about our sensibilities and the types of stories we wanted to tell. Actually, in that interview, I also mentioned the fact that I was interested in directing. I'd done a bunch of short films. I did a low budget feature years ago when I was in Virginia, so I wasn't totally new to directing, but it was still. Like Todd said recently, it's it was bold of you to bring that up. But I brought it up from the standpoint of I would just love the opportunity. I would love to learn, however long it takes. I just, if I could sit in on extra meetings, if I could shadow extra episodes just to kind of grow. I know it's not something that would happen season 1. But I would just love to and so I planted that seed at the very beginning, and so we had our interview. Went well. I think we hit it off, and then so then they hired me February. I think our first day was February 18th, 2020. So we had 3.5 weeks in the room before
good old COVID.
The world show. Yeah.
And the rest is history. So I'm presuming that you were a superhero fan before joining the show. I mean, how much of a fan are you?
Uh, when I was in high school, I had a pull box, at the local comic book store that was like it was like 150 $200 a month, like habit that I had to like. I went cold turkey at one point. So I grew
Wow.
up reading comic books. It was my weekly ritual. I started like the thing that really got me going was Giant Size X-Men #1. It was. I remember we did a read through of the pilot over Zoom with like everybody. Like it was like a lot of people on that Zoom.
Mhm.
But the person I was like the most excited to see was Jim Lee. Jim Lee popped up on the Zoom, and I was like for the read through, and I was like, oh, like I was just got so super excited. Um, but yeah, so like that was kind of my like gateway was like the Claremont Jim Lee era of X-Men, and like that led through like all the X stuff, Generation X, like a lot of that, and then expanded out into obviously like Superman, Batman. Like I was mostly Marvel for a good chunk of my youth, but
It's all right.
um, it is what it is. But obviously, huge fan of of Batman, Superman, like
Mm.
and all that storytelling. So and just would read as much as I could, of
Mm.
both like comic book stuff and then like sci-fi, fantasy novels, all of that. I was just giant, giant nerd as a kid. Um, but yeah, there was like a section of time where it was like kind of high school going into college. I was like, I can't afford this anymore. I can't afford this habit. Like it's too much. So then I weaned off for a couple of years, and then what I would do is I would just wait for the trades, to match because I just couldn't keep up with it like weekly. But I would like get the trades and then take like a long weekend and just power through stories. And now, I've got a little bit of time on my hands, so I'm like digging into a bunch of stories and trades and stuff that I've missed, the last couple of years, and that's
Do you
been
know
it's been a
what? Do
lot
you
of
know what?
fun.
I have just got a vision of a rehab center for comic book collectors, just like all sitting in a room, in a circle, chatting about their addiction, and you're there, Jay. You're there going, well, but no, I've got to say it's quite refreshing to hear that someone who is partly responsible for writing the story has got this passion for this superhero show because there are other superhero shows that have been on our screens and they have been in the past. But I've got to say, the great thing about Superman and Lois, it's very grounded, very honest. Richard Donner made Superman the movie, and he always had a sign above his doorway that read verisimilitude, which is about doing everything with honesty. And this show definitely follows that, completely. I mean, this show has got quite a few writers. So when you say staff writers, what are staff writers? What's the difference between a writer and a staff writer?
Oh yeah, so it's just a kind of the level like of like where you're at in your career. So staff writer is like the entry level position. Then you move up to story editor, then executive story editor, then co-producer, producer. There's like a consulting producer level in there, and then co-EP, and then EP. And so it's just a matter of like how many years you've been on the show. There are like certain responsibility things. Like once you're a producer, you're involved in more of like the meetings, like pre-production meetings, casting, like kind of the broader
Mm.
strokes things. Um, but like in the room, everyone has like the same voice. It used to be some rooms where it's like staff writers weren't allowed to pitch until they were like called on,
Oh,
seen,
wow.
not heard. Like it depends on the room. Our room was really great for like no matter who's in there, everyone is able to pitch ideas on the same level. Even our support staff, writer's assistant, script coordinator, writer's PA. If you've got a good idea and you come in and pitch it, like we're open to it. It's a big conversation. Um, yeah, and that shows also in the fact that like our support staff have gotten multiple scripts.
Mm.
on the show. Writer's assistant, uh, Adam, who now is a staff writer, like he got a script season 1. Max Cunningham, our who stepped in briefly as a writer's assistant season 1, or he just came, he was an assistant season 1, got a script, and then became a writer's assistant season 2 and 3, got scripts both of those seasons. So it's like that level of like support staff, supporting the support staff is something rarely seen in the industry, and it's just a testament to kind of how our writers room works as a collective and as kind of a family.
So when you say that certain people get scripts, am I right in saying that they're getting that script to basically come up with for that episode? And then is it sort of a round table and they're sort of in charge at the end of the day of that episode?
Yeah. So when scripts are assigned, we basically, the way we work the show is we'll go in the first couple of weeks, we'll blue sky the season. So it's just kind of like broad strokes. What are we going to, here's the villain that we're thinking about. Here are the concepts we're thinking about dealing with. Here's some like big tentpole story points that may happen. And we kind of just pitch into that as a collective. And then as those things kind of start to solidify, then we'll work out like what order folks will get scripts, who's writing what. And it kind of comes up, like we'll start breaking an episode sometimes before we know who's writing it, because we break it as a room collectively. But usually the person who's writing it will then, or no, we will know who's writing it before we break it. It's the idea of like just kind of like the broad, because the person who's writing it usually leads the room. So like if it's like the episode that I wrote, 303, it was I think we had just finished breaking 1, and then Todd and Brent kind of assigned, they're like, all right, you're directing one later, so we want to get your one that you're writing kind of out of the way earlier in the season, was part of their thought process. So I could just kind of like do that, and then I won't have any kind of lingering responsibilities from that episode when I'm like going to shadow and going to direct later in the season. So they but the subject matter of 2 like was something that was kind of like like in Katie's wheelhouse a little bit, in terms of like they're like going to the party, and like everyone on the show can write everything, and all the characters, I think, but like it was one of those things where it's like, oh, this is a fun thing. It's like right in her voice. So we were kind of like, all right, Katie will do 2, you'll do 3, and so then when I got assigned 3, we kind of had some rough ideas of like what it was going to be. And then I went and pitched, like, I was like, all right, well, what if we did these things, and I would come in with some ideas. And then as the room's pitching, I would kind of, I respond to this, or I don't respond to that, or whatever the case may be. And I'll kind of like lead what I'm feeling in terms of the show, and then we would pitch it to Todd and Brent, and they would shape it and bring their ideas and all of that. And that's kind of how and then once we kind of have a strong, idea of what the episode is going to look like, we go off, like we pitch the whole thing out, Todd and Brent get their notes, and then go off to, write our outlines and or our story documents and our outlines and write the script.
I mean, do you ever spend any time sort of during filming being there just in case they need to change anything?
Absolutely. Yeah. Like that's another thing that our show does that is like, one of the things we're striking about is like getting more writers on set, because there's so many shows that are being they're writing everything all at once, and then they're letting the writer staff go, and there's just left with a few EPs who will go to set to produce, but like one of the
So, would you like to take home a piece of film history or TV history into your own home? Find your own piece of magic with Prop Store, the world's leading auctioneers of film props, costumes, and more. So check out propstore.com or follow the link in the description of this video. And while you're doing that, why don't you use our special code? Our special code will give you 10% off anything in the Buy Now section. And the code is easy to remember. It's Brian10. That's BRYAN 10, and it's just above the finger, just here. Use that at the checkout to get your 10% off. That's propstore.com.
One of the things that I learned when we weren't allowed to go to set season 1 because of COVID. You know, like they only sent, I think only like the EPs went to set because they were trying to limit, you know, and there's a lot of logistics and all of that. So starting with season 2, writers would go to set to produce their episode. And at that point, I was a story editor, but like, you know, as like a lower level writer going to set and being able to produce, you know, my episode, I produced, I think it was 209. And like being able to go up there to be on set, see the process. And it is the thing where it's like the actors will come and say, hey, this line doesn't really work for me. I'm not feeling it. Or maybe they could say this, or maybe they could say that. Like, it's, you know, and it's good to have a writer there where it's like, yeah, okay, and rewrite the thing. Or you're working with the director and like a location has to change because you can't find the right thing, or weather, or like just logistics in general. And so then like, okay, cool. Well, if we change the location, it's not as simple as just saying like, all right, we'll just film it here. We have to kind of like rework the scene a little bit to account for the change of location. So it's very important that writers go to set, learn the process, because then it makes you a better writer. And it makes it the show smoother because you know from get-go, like, oh, I need to do this. I need to write in this way because these are what our sets look like. There's like an interesting thing. Season 1, you know, we wrote without any, like, none of us had been to set, you know, and so we had diagrams and we kind of knew, but we would write things with it, like, you know, it's like, oh, they're in the living room and they're talking to them in the den, you know, or whatever the case may be. This is. And then when you get to set, you're like, oh, there's no way blocking wise that would work, you know? And so it's like understanding like where you're, like what your sets look like and the rhythms of the crew and the actors and all that just makes for a better writer. It makes for a smoother process. It's important, you know? And that's one of the things that, you know, Todd and then Brent later have been really good about, is like developing the skills of like the younger writers coming up, you know, and giving those opportunities, which is something not a lot of showrunners do.
I mean, do the actors have any influence on the actual stories? You know, you coming up with the ideas and actually coming up with the actual story for that episode. Do the actors have an influence where they can say, do you know, I can't see the character doing that? I mean, has that happened in the past?
There are, like, they definitely have, you know, input in conversations with like Todd and Brent, like to what extent, and like that's above like my pay grade, you know, like in terms of like how, what, you know, their, what like their, like what pitches they, you know, throw out that come in or whatever. But I mean, yeah, they, especially Tyler and Bitsy, you know, they have very strong opinions on like who their characters are and like what their points of view are. And you know, we definitely, you know, I value that collaboration, you know, because they spend a lot of time thinking about those characters and like what they would do or say or feel and what have you. And you know, I know for me, from a directing standpoint, I'll just speak for my experience. Like, from a directing standpoint, you know, working with Tyler and Bitsy through the scenes, it's like, you know, there are moments where it's like, yeah, Tyler's like, yeah, like I feel like he would come in like this and do this. Like, oh yeah, that makes the scene so much better. Like
Mm.
I had a whole thing playing out in my head, and that I'd blocked for this action sequence or whatever. But like Tyler came in with this very cogent thought, and I was like, oh yeah, no, that's what we should do. So we'll do that, and I think that collaboration throughout is important.
Good, good, good. I'm glad to hear there's no egos as well, because I've got to say, from all the casts I've interviewed, they've just said everyone has been so nice. Everyone's just nice on set, behind the camera and in front of the camera, which is really nice to hear. I mean, I was speaking to Dia Vadia the other day, and she said that you were responsible for onomatopoeia to actually come onto the show, and you've been trying since season one. So why has it taken you so long to get that awesome character to screen?
Yeah, it's funny. The story behind that is really great. So, again, like I said, we started the room season one, like February. COVID, we had like a few week, like we had like a week or two in the Zoom room, and then we did like a hiatus to try to figure out like what was going on. Like, are we going to try to shoot the pilot? Or are we just going to hold off and shoot, like just start shooting in September? Like, what's going on? And so in that time frame, like it was like maybe 4 weeks or so. In that time frame, I found myself going back through and watching a bunch of Kevin Smith movies, and I one of the reasons I'm a filmmaker is because of Kevin Smith. I was like the right age to be watching like Clerks and Mallrats and Dogma and
Mm.
be inspired by someone who just went and made a thing. He just got it together with his friends and went and made a thing. And that's what I started when I was younger. I would just go, I would have an idea and I would get my friends together and we would make a short film like that. And it would just be over and over again, like that process. And that's how I, kind of developed my voice and learned filmmaking. To me, it was just filmmaking. It was just like writing, directing, editing. It was all kind of one thing. It was just like, I'm
Mm.
going to make a thing. And so in watching all of that stuff, I also started thinking, I was thinking about the show, obviously, and like pitches for the show. And one of the things that I thought could be interesting would be, like there are different ways I think of approaching Superman, as a character, like and especially his antagonist. And one thing that I think is important is presenting him with problems he can't punch. So
Mm.
being a dad, just in general, it's one of those things like you can lift an iceberg over your head, but like sometimes you don't understand like what's going on like with your kids, and like and all like just like and that was also the basis of my spec script. It was like a black superhero during the civil rights movement, like how you can't punch racism,
No.
itself. You can punch racists, but sometimes that makes it worse. So it's like it's that space, like living in that space and as a thought exercise. And but then I took it to another level where I was like, but I also want to see Superman like over like he's got power. Like I want like what's an interesting villain in that sense. And I said, oh, what if there were like villains whose power set turns one of Superman's strengths into a weakness?
Mm.
So as super hearing, what if there was a villain that manipulated that hearing in some way, manipulated the sonic stuff? And in all of this while I was, kind of going through my Kevin Smith retrospective, and I remembered, the reading the Green Arrow comics where onomatopoeia was a character. And then I remembered the article where Kevin Smith said, like, you can't really, adapt this character to cinema. And I just took it as like a thought experiment challenge, which is what I often do, where it's like, okay, what would I do? How could we do this? And so I just had this kind of like inspiration. I wrote like a 3-page uh pitch, like just on my own. Like I said, we were on hiatus. I wrote this like long pitch out with like, and I had like the costume design and like, oh, this is how we could adapt the power, and like it would be like making it cinematic and like, but also playing into like it's like almost like a horror movie villain, where sound design is like really important to like how that plays out. And I sent it to Todd and Brent, and they were like really excited about it. They were like, "Oh, this is really cool. We're definitely going to do this character. Not this season because this season's pretty much planned out. It's got a lot of Tauro. There's a lot we got to deal with him. We don't want to, but like next season for sure." And I'm like, "Great." And then we started like the top of season 2, that blue sky period that I was talking about earlier, and onomatopoeia was like on the menu. It was like one of those things where it's like, all right, this is a good chance for that. And then someone said bizarro, and we were like, oh, okay, yeah, we're gonna do bizarro, which is great. I was super excited about. But but then like when we were digging into blue skying this season, it was early on we knew we were doing Bruno, and we knew that Bruno would have to have an enforcer of some kind. And that's when I can't even remember if I was the one who was like just kind of sitting there, was like,
With your hand up going,
or
hello.
yeah. I mean, I do a thing where it's like there are a couple of pitch. I have a few more, where it's like there are a couple of things that I just keep pitching that people know, and then like everyone's like, "This is a cool idea," when it fits. And so every now and then, other folks will pitch some of my ideas out, and I'm like, "Thank you. That's very helpful for me." Like to, so I don't remember if I was the one who brought up onomatopoeia for this season again, or if someone else did. But yeah, and it worked out. And the cool thing about like it happening, it's one of those things. A lot of my career has been, things not working out when I want them to, or when I think they should, but when they're supposed to, And this was one of those things where having onomatopoeia show up this season allowed for us to do an even more different take, because initially when I pitched onomatopoeia, it was not a woman. It was not a woman of color. So it wouldn't have been Daya, and I got to direct the episode, like an episode that had onomatopoeia in it, and like the use of those powers and all of that. So it was like, which if we had done onomatopoeia last season, I wouldn't have been able to do. So, it's one of those things where timing of everything worked out the way it's supposed to. But yeah, it was a long journey to get there.
Obviously, directing, that is a massive step on the show. Were you nervous at all going into that episode to direct?
Absolutely terrified. It was there were definitely some close to like panic and anxiety attacks, which I just like I'd been diagnosed with just recently, like I think this season, and so it was one of those things where like learning what it is helps process what it is, and it just like it helped factor through. But definitely, like there were times in prep where it felt overwhelming and overwhelmed. Usually, when I was just like in the hotel, like trying to like read the script and make plans, and every time I got on a meeting, like a Zoom call, a pre-production meeting, every time I was interacting with the other creatives and department heads, it like went away, because our team is so incredibly talented and smart and kind and good that like it was like, oh, okay, yeah. And then also I learned to just trust my instincts, where it's like, oh no, I've done this before, not at this level, but I've done this before. I know the show, I know the characters, I know most of the actors, like we're all like really close. So like once I kind of like stepped on set and got over like the jitters of like the first day, first scene, first take of it all, it's like, oh no, this is the same stuff I've been doing since I was in high school, just at like another level. But the one person who was really helpful in the whole process was Greg Smith, our producing director.
Mm-hmm.
He is truly. I mean, there were like a lot of folks who helped. Like I say, like the cast and crew were the green screen and wires that allowed me to fly as a director. Like they really helped build me up. But Greg was, I shadowed him on his episode on 308, and he's just such a like incredible director and teacher, so generous, and was like there the first like day to just kind of like be, not hovering at all, just like helpful, like just like if I need to run something by him, or like just kind of stood back, like, all right, yeah, he's got it, and then he went off and started storyboarding and prepping for the finale, which he had to do because it's massive. So yeah.
So compared to season 2 and compared to season 1's finale, how would you rate season 3 finale?
It's massive. Like that's, I mean, it's that's the only thing I could. It's great. Like I got the script. The script came out, I want to say the day that I wrapped on my episode. I took myself to dinner, and I read the script. Like I had dinner. If you ever go to Vancouver, there's a restaurant called Kisatanto. It's incredible, Japanese Italian fusion.
Ooh.
Very good restaurant. And so I just sat up at the bar, and I was reading the script on my phone, and I was texting Todd like, oh, what are we doing? Like, man, you were okay. All right. Like they really, it's a great finale. And hopefully we'll be able to get a season 4. Like it's a great lead in to what I think would be an incredible season.
Because we know that there's a cliffhanger, and I think a lot of fans are worrying out there because, in case it isn't renewed, because it's like the last Superman show out there. And I think someone from the CW, Swartz, he mentioned that it would be announced or decided within the last like 4 episodes of what they were going to do. But obviously with the writer's strike and now the actor's strike that's going to be happening, I think that's going to pause everything anyway. I mean, do you see it being renewed? I mean, obviously you want it to be renewed, but do you see it being renewed because of the way the CW's being at the moment?
I don't have any inside information that anyone else has. But I will say this: like I am I'm a manifester. Like I'm like some like like I just believe in like putting the things out there as they need to be and all that. And with that, I've believed that there will be a season 4, and that's kind of like the way I've been operating. I'm hopeful that it'll happen, but again, I don't know anything more than anyone else.
And where would you like the story to go? Because obviously we're going to be introduced to Michael Cutlitz as Lex Luthor on the next episode, who I just think is a phenomenal actor, and to see him in as Lex, I'm just so excited. So where do you see the story going in season 4? Do you think that we're going to see a lot more Lex and the antics there? I mean, could that be a possibility?
Yeah, absolutely. I like I said, I've got a lot of pitches for various characters, like that are big and small. But there are a lot of things. There's a lot of stories still left to tell. In our world, in our universe, and Lex will obviously be a factor in that. Um, and yeah, like I think that's all I can. I think that's all I can say.
That is fine.
There's
Fine.
that's all I can say.
Well, hopefully I'll get Lex on the show in the next week or so, because this show is just amazing, and I just want it to carry on for many, many years. And I think everything that the writers yourself has done, tackling the cancer storyline. I know there's a lot of feedback online, pro people against it and people for it. I think it's very brave to have in a superhero program, and it's done amazing. It has affected me personally because of family that have passed with it and who has it. But I just think that it's something that we shouldn't shy away from. It's something that we should have on our TV and see that struggle and see that love and that connection between Clark and Lois. I think it's beautiful. I really, really do. But Jay, I'm looking at the time. I've run out of time. Thank you so much for being on the show. And thank you for all the amazing work that you've done on Superman and Lois and given us an amazing show.
For sure. I appreciate you having me. And yeah.